when we bought the property in 2015, the assessment for land was $155,000, and the assessment for the building was $187,000.
I'm sorry, that was the assessed value at the time you purchased it?
That was the value, not assessed value, but that was the valuation that the assessment was based on.
For the assessor's office?
Right.
And how much was that again?
That was $155,000 in 2015, and $187,000 for land, and $187,000 for the building value in 2015.
And the 155 was land?
155 was land, and 187,100 was the building value.
And this was in what year? 19?
In 2015.
2015.
When we bought the building. So we knew that since we were starting the RTA the following year, assuming that all got approved, the assessor would change the improvement value back to the 2015 value. But in 2016, he adjusted both the land value and the building value. Now, it was a quadrennial assessment year, and he increased the land value by more than half, or by more than twice, from 155 to 331. And you know, they did their calculus, took out their slide rule, did their math, and decided that the improvement value should come down 3,000, and they reassessed the building from 187 to 184. So they did those, and you know, I certainly respect the assessor's office. I know they do hard work, and it's a big job, and you know, now that there's one of them instead of 7, they got a lot more work to do, but they still, as I understand it, are supposed to follow the commission's rules and do their assessments or reassessments, particularly when they do it on a parcel by parcel basis, only during the quadrennial reassessment years, pursuant to Section 213 of the rules and regulations of this commission. So I was surprised when then, after the reassessment in 2016, it was reassessed again in 2018, where in 2016 they doubled the land value. In 2018, they more than doubled the building value. So initially, I made an appeal and gave a bunch of reasons in my appeal why that shouldn't be. When I went to the Board of Appeals hearing in New Orleans, my main concern was, hey, you know, if they can assess me every year, then I'm just back here next year. What good does it do to even come in here if they can just reassess me, no matter what the Board of Appeals or the Tax Commission decides? They're supposed to be doing it only every 4 years. And unfortunately, the Board of Appeals said, well, that's not a valuation matter. We're set up with a bunch of appraisers here to decide the value and the certified tax rolls for the city. You're bringing up a question of law. That's a matter for the commission to decide. That's their rules and regulations. We can't really decide that.
And we don't have jurisdiction over law. So.
Well,
yeah.
All I can tell you is that it's your rules and regulations, and the assessor.
Well, I know what the rules and regs are. I'm just saying, if it's a legal issue.
Well, I don't think there's any question of law. I scored very well in reading comprehension on the SAT,
yeah.
And I know what your rules say, and it says that he can only do a reassessment during a quadrennial reassessment year, which is 2016 and 2020. He did one in 2018, and on that basis alone, it should be disallowed. And that's the only argument I'm going to make with respect to the improvement value. Because I have an RTA pending that I fully expect the assessor will honor, and per the rules, change whatever the assessed value winds up being after this hearing. Once the RTA is signed by the governor, it's sitting on his desk waiting for the signature. Once that gets signed, I'm sure the assessor is going to move it back to the $187,000 building valuation that he had in 2015 as the law calls for. And in fact, they've told me that. Their personnel have told me that. They used a methodology of using a $25 per square foot valuation for everything on Moss Street. Moss Street is on Bayou St. John in New Orleans. It's one of the oldest and most historic streets. It's waterfront property. The frontage is extremely valuable. And what the assessor did, is they applied a 25% valuation on all the property, along Bayou St. John.
25
However,
25 or 20?
$25 per square foot. And is my understanding. So, however, most of those lots are about 100 feet deep or less. Now, my lots, I have 2 lots that are 30 by 276 feet deep. I've got 30 feet of frontage and 276 feet of depth. Together, I've got 60 feet of frontage and 276 feet of depth. By the appraiser's methodology, his argument that were my land turned sideways, 90 degrees to the right or the left, and I had 276 feet of frontage On Bayou St. John, my valuation would be exactly the same, and it shouldn't be any more valuable than it is today. I used the back half of my lot to raise chickens in. My neighbors put their dumpsters there for the church and the school that are next to me. So right across the property line is the dumpsters. In front, I got a beautiful view of Bayou St. John. In back, I'm raising chickens. It's got kind of agricultural land value at best. So I know I didn't submit this as an exhibit, but you've all seen pictures of, plantation property up and down the river. And generally what happened is they had long parcels, they had a lot of land, but what was the most important thing in the valuation was the frontage along the river. If you got 10,000 acres, but you only got 4 feet of frontage along the public right-of-way, only one person can come through it at a time, even though you have 10,000 square feet of, 10,000 square feet of land, so, or 10,000 acres, or however much you got. So the point is that according to the assessor that I hired, he said, no, square footage of appraisal isn't correct here because you've got different depths of lots. It's not a one-size-all approach that will work. What you need to do is use lineal feet of frontage approach. And what he did is he used a lineal feet of frontage that was 2,500 per lineal foot. And that left all the comps unchanged in value, but it changed my valuation. And he said, and he's a former member of the tax commission, he said that that's the right appraisal method. And so he gave me appraisal, which I submitted, that says the land value ought to be 166, slightly more than they had it in 2015, but way under the 331 that they increased it to in 2016. So, of course, the commission goes through a process where they hire their own appraisal staff and do independent valuations for consideration by the commission and the appellates and the participants in the hearing. So the appraisal we got from Ms. Labatt showed a valuation on the land of $231,000 or $230,000, I believe, which was over $100,000 below the assessor's valuation. My own appraiser's valuation was maybe $60,000 below Ms. Labatt's valuation, but Ms. Labatt's, the commission's valuation, was much closer to the one that I submitted from my appraisal than it was in the valuation that the assessor did. So my request regarding the land valuation is to change the valuation to the appraised amount of 166 per the attachment that I submitted, but in no event should it be higher than the appraisal that Ms. Labatt prepared at 230 as land value, which again is 100,000 below the assessor's valuation. So in summary, the improvement valuation shouldn't be considered because it was not done during a quadrennial assessment year. That should not be allowed. That should be disallowed on procedural grounds. And then the land valuation, although they tried a one-size-fits-all fair approach across the board, it didn't take into account the differing depths of lots, and I was unfairly treated in that process because I have an extremely deep lot, which is not typical. A different valuation method was not used, although there's one that's commonly and historically used in valuations where you have high frontage value, like riverfront or bayou property. And that method was not used. That has a lineal foot valuation. And using a lineal foot valuation, it honors all the comp values and puts me where I'm requesting to be at 166 of land valuation. Thank you.
Looking at the comps, there are some frontages that are as low as 36, 38.
But the important thing here is the depth, sir.
Yeah.
Are there any that are 276 feet deep?
There's one that's 275.
He's probably also unfairly
He's 65
impacted.
foot in width as well.
Yeah, he should be here too.
1364 miles.
Oh, that's me.
Oh.
That's me. They're not using me as a comp, are they?
Yeah, his
You're a comp of your comp.
calculation, I'm sorry. No. So
It's
yeah,
a self-proving theory.
most of them are 121, 128, 109, and depth 113.
Right.
But
And I'm
they're also,
276.
but they're also about half, or maybe a little bit more than half in width too. So I mean,
The point is the square footage of land relative to the amount of frontage is much greater in mine than the comps. And all of my land, or at least half of it, is beyond the depth of the other lots in the interior of the block where it's nearly inaccessible from the street. I certainly can't,
Yeah.
even though I have a lot that's twice the size of a lot that's only 120 feet deep or 130 feet deep, I can't use that second half of the lot. I can't build on it. I've got one lot of record. I can't put anything back. I got some chickens back there. They're nice. They don't come when they're called, but, you know, they're laying eggs.
My wife doesn't come when called. I come when called, but she doesn't come. I know Jimmy Thorns, and I have tremendous respect for his work. My struggle with his appraisal is getting to that $10 a square foot, or the $2,500 based on front footage. I agree with you that when you've got that much depth, you know, the greater value obviously is in the front, not in the very back, unless, you know, now, I'm assuming is there street access in the back, or?
No.
Okay, so you just back up to another piece of
Back
property?
up to a church parking lot where they keep the
Okay.
dumpsters
All
up
right.
against the
Yeah,
property.
okay. So you need to take that into consideration. Like I say, my concern and my struggle is how we got to the $10 a square foot,
I think
which
if
also
I'm-
gets to the $2,500
Yeah.
a front foot. So,
If I may provide some clarification there, I think what he tried to do, he wasn't trying to get to $10 a foot. What he demonstrated is that there is a fair assessment method that works on all the waterfront property. It's a lineal foot treatment, not a square foot treatment. And when you look at me at $2,500 a foot, it values me at $166, but everybody else doesn't change. The only person that changes are the people with extraordinarily deep lots like me. And everybody else is left at about the same valuation. So as it turns out, there is one fair across the board method, but it's not square footage, it's lineal footage. And that theory rests in appraisal law and appraisal theory going back centuries.
So if you went to the church right now and said, hey, I'll sell you half my lot, I'm sure you would have a value there, right?
They would be able to use its value more than I could, because they have, the back of my lot is actually closer to Esplanade Street than it is to Moss Street.
My point being, it does have value. I mean,
It would have more value to the church than it does to me, because they have a closely accessible street frontage, which I don't have.
I mean, I've personally had the opportunity to buy waterfront property before, and they do generally base on a linear foot of frontage
Right.
on a lake or a river.
Right.
But they also give value based on the size of the lot, the
Sure.
depth of the lot, and the use of the lot. If it's acreage, they may divide it up into a standard residential lot and give value to the acreage. They may give a disproportionate value to the square footage of the rear portion of the lot, but it does have value.
Sure, and in our case, though, you know, we're zoned as 1 and 2 family zoning, and so I can't really do any expansion. At the time, I had a non-conforming 5-plex that I've since converted into a single family with the RTA, but
I'm not disagreeing with you in
Yeah.
total here.
yeah, I
Okay.
agree. I'm just saying that, you know, if it were industrial or something, I could put my XYZ facility back there, but it's not, I can't build anything back there. So I'm left with agricultural uses because of the zoning.
When you're describing this as agricultural because you have chickens, how many chickens are we talking about? Are you a chicken farmer, or are you like my neighbors that have chicken coops?
Well, yeah, I'm a hobbyist.
Okay.
I'd like to think I'm a chicken farmer, but we only have 5.
Okay.
And when we found out the rooster was illegal, we got rid of him and sent him back to St. Bernard Parish. So we are following the rules. We got less than 6, and
Less than 6,
we
yeah.
banished the male during the Me Too movement.
Okay,
you know,
got it.
so.
Good for you.
My son has also started beekeeping back there, but I'm not sure the honey sales are going to be very consequential, but he assures me we'll at least break even on the equipment cost.
Good luck.
Look, on Jimmy's appraisal, he used a price per square foot when he finalized his number.
He did. I think that was mainly for illustration purposes,
Yeah.
but the point was is that the lineal foot valuation is the fair approach that perhaps should have been used by the assessor's office.
Well, front footage price he arrived at was $162,500. And the
Right.
price per square foot was $166, basically the same number, but.
Right.
Yeah,
So
and I guess what we're struggling on, price per foot, that's 6.8, there's a range between 6.83 to 46.21. The 6.83 is really an outlier because it's, you know, it's a very, very large tract.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, what is it? 249,000 square feet. It's almost one that you just kind of have to throw out. I mean, that's really pushing the average down quite a bit, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show what an overly large, how an overly large lot quickly declines in value.
Yeah.
Like
And I
mine.
realize you should get some benefit as opposed to like the comp 6, 7, 8, 9. They're smaller.
Right.
I mean, they're basically a third of your size.
I don't know if that comparable number 9, the 249,000 square feet, is actually an arm's length transaction. I think it was a sale from the state to Deutsches Haus
Oh, that's
in
right.
return for
Yeah.
their expropriation of land
Did read that.
on Galvin. So
That's comp number 10?
Should be 10.
Number 1700 Moss Street.
Yeah, comp number 10.
Number
Yeah.
10, yeah.
So really, that's kind of an outlier that really I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have used. But
Yeah. All right, well, at this point, do we have any other questions? Let's hear from the assessor's office, if not. Mr. Levine?
The, as Mr. Fairbanks said, the comp is on Moss Street, which overlooks Bayou St. John. Not many waterfront properties in New Orleans unless we have a heavy rain. But this, pretty much all waterfront properties have a premium value, be it this property, properties further down on Bayou St. John, the lakes, properties in the east. So we have a premium land value on everything that fronts on both sides of the bayou, that front on the bayou, on Moss Lane. Just as a point, and Mr. Fairbanks mentioned that also, I know it's beyond the date of valuation, but the property was purchased in December of 15 for $1,025,000, and it is two different parcels, two different lots, 14 and 15. Doing an analysis of improved sales, because there are no land sales on Moss Street that took place during the valuation period. But doing an analysis of improved sales, properties fronting Moss Street sold for approximately $299 a square foot, where interior properties with residential frontage, looking at other residential properties, sold for a median value of $205 a square foot, which indicates the premium value for being on Moss Street. I provided...
That was land with improvement.
That's land with improvements, yes. And as I said, there are no Moss Street land sales that took place in the 15 valuation rate. But I think land sales on Moss Street need to be used to value property on Moss Street. And also, I just understood that this was a land appeal. I didn't realize.
That's my understanding, yes.
And also to correct, it's $20 a square foot, not $25 a square foot.
Right.
I have four comparables prior to 2015 date, and then one comparable in December of 2015, all above $20 a square foot, from $21 up to $46 a square foot. Orleans Parish Assessor's Office has every parcel on Moss Street on both sides of the bayou valued at $20 a square foot, and those parcels range from 2,100 square feet to over 25,000 square feet. The parcels adjacent to the subject property are deep, and they're also valued at $20 a square foot.
They're about half our depth.
Well, that was my question. The $20 a square foot certainly a uniform number.
Yes.
Are there any adjustments made for property that say based on depth?
No.
Okay.
We only use linear foot, front foot, basically on commercial properties. Everything, almost all residential properties are done on a square foot basis, except some of the properties out on Chef Highway, which are waterfront, but we use the water frontage, which is the value to that, and we value those on a front foot basis.
Because what I'm saying is if,
Everything
if,
else
if I've got a piece of property that's, well, if I've got sales, let's say, that run an average of 120 feet deep, and they're selling for, make up a number, $20 a square foot, but there's also some properties that have 300 feet of depth. The back 300 feet would not seem to be worth as much as the front footage. Not front footage in that respect, but the front of the property would be more valuable than the rear of the property. So if the value is $20 a square foot, but that value is coming from properties that are, like in my example, 150 feet deep, and you have a piece of property next door that's 300 feet deep, I don't know that it's double. It might be worth a little more because you got a little more land that you can build on or do whatever. But I don't know that it's worth double because that's basically what you'd be doing.
And something just as drastic as what Chairman Shahardy just explained, if it's in the irregular shaped lot.
Irregular shaped lots.
I mean, I would present a big problem with what you just described.
Pie shaped, like on the
Well,
inside corner.
like a cul-de-sac lot where you've got maybe, 50 or 60 feet of frontage,
But you got a back.
but the back might be 120 feet
Right.
of width
Right.
because of the roughly pie shape. So,
So anything
In some
that has
instances
frontage,
I'm sorry?
anything, if I understood what you said, all lots that had frontage, water foot frontage, the same regardless of the amount of frontage?
On Bayou St. John?
Yes.
That is correct.
Okay.
And may I
But I
ask a
think on
question?
Bayou St. John, the more land you have, the better. I mean, those properties are not typically used for agricultural use. I mean, there are uses that can be used on 275-foot depth of property. And as Mr. Birchie was saying, if that is of no use, I'm sure the church would have a use for it, or the property surrounding it, if you wanted to subdivide it and sell it off at least $20 a square foot, according to the comparables that we had.
I don't know, if you remember from appraisal school that we all went to, the old 4-3-2-1 rule. Okay, I don't know how good that rule is or isn't, but the front 25% is worth 40% of the value. Next 25% is worth 30, and then 20, and then 10%.
Overall,
Look,
it holds for true.
for all I know, the church needs parking. They might be willing to pay Mr. Fairbanks $50 a foot because they need parking.
Sure.
That's
And if
not
I
an arm's length transaction. It's more of a need. Like I said, my concern with $20 a foot with all lots that are, say, the standard lot size might be 150 feet, give or take, at $20 a foot, because that's what the sales were, that sounds good. But if you've got a lot of record, and I assume this is a lot of record, is that correct? This is not
2 lots.
2 lots. I mean, we say 2 lots. How is it?
There's 2 lots, 30
feet-
by
30
30
feet each.
of width
Okay,
and
that's fine.
276 feet of
Okay.
depth. They're both on the same tax.
Okay, so that's
bill.
fine then. It's got all that, it's got more depth. So while I would say that those 2 lots are worth more than lots that are not that deep,
Sure.
I don't know that it's worth the same $20 a square foot. Again, in my example I used, I don't know that it's worth the same $20 a square foot past 150 feet of depth.
I would think it's worth every penny of $20 past the Is there a second structure in the back?
Yes, there is.
And that's toward the back end of the property?
Yeah, were there any comps that had depth of more than 150 feet?
I did not value that.
Whatsoever?
Yeah, I believe there was,
I don't think there were any. When I looked at the tax
I think
plating maps.
1035 Moss Street had excess depth, but it was beyond the lien date. Anyway, there is a structure to the back of the property?
Yep.
And what is that?
It was kind of a tear-down, 14-foot wide structure that I just got done renovating under the RTA, and we moved Lydia's parents into it. It's
So
kind
there
of a
is
mother-in-law
use on the
house.
back end of the property?
On that part of the back end, yeah, on one of the lots, and there's no use on the front of it except for a driveway to get to the back. So that's an existing building though. I can't build anything way back here, and that's another 60 feet of land.
That's what we were just talking about. Yeah. That's what he just.
Just as the survey, there is a residence on the back portion of the property. So,
On the back portion of one of the properties.
well,
One of the lots,
So-
okay.
It effectively works I mean, it was owned by the same people for years and years, and I think that's like a mother-in-law cottage or whatever. It's a smaller home in the
but
back.
there is use on the back side of the property.
Oh, I'm not
Yeah.
saying there's not, I'm not saying there's not use, okay?
But it
I'm just
doesn't have the
saying-
same nice waterfront views as that front building.
Yeah. So, all right, I don't want to,
I provided, the tax commission, the taxpayer's appraisal has comparables in it, which I listed under item number F. We stated in the appraisal that equal valuation was given to all comparables, which would put a value of $23 a square foot and not $10 a square foot, as he had in his appraisal. And again, I would throw out the comparable at 1700 Moss Street, which is the lowest. Comparable 6 and 11 are the sale of the same property, which just shows you the increase in 5 years of land on Moss Street. The taxpayer also provided a list of assessments within the district. In his appeal, and every property that he provided on Moss Street is valued at $20 a square foot.
But they all have less depth than
That I can't speak to. All I have is an address and your $20 per square foot on your report that you submitted.
Yeah, I think the assessor did an earnest attempt at making a fair across-the-board assessment. It's just that with the deeper lots, the square footage disadvantages the deeper lots unfairly.
I agree that in some instances, the depth of a lot would have an effect on value. On Moss Street, I disagree, especially since the rear portion of the lot is being used as a residence, as a mother-in-law apartment. Finally, considering the values that the assessor's office had at $20, in excess of $20 a square foot, the values that the taxpayer's appraiser had, which would seem to be over $20 a square foot. The fact that the property sold for over $1 million, and the fact that we have every other parcel, no matter depth or width, on Moss Street, valued at $20 a square foot. That we feel a fair value and represents equity throughout the neighborhood, throughout the Moss Street corridor, at every property valued at $20 a square foot. Therefore, we think the land should be valued at $331,700, which is where it was in 2016. The revaluation year has not changed.
all right.
That amount again was what?
The land value $331,700.
Okay. Okay, I thought I misheard. That's what I have. I thought I misheard you.
Can you say which comparables with the same property again, because I don't see that?
6 and 11. No? I think it's 2 and 11.
2 and 11?
I think it's 2 and 11, right? 905 Moss.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Thank you.
905 Moss Street, under item F. 905 Moss Street, number 6 and number 11.
I think it's 2 and 11.
Two.
What we have is 2 and 11 under
2 was the
his.
last thing.
Are you yours instead of his, because we're looking at his?
Oh, okay. No, I was referring to item number F on the information I presented.
Oh, okay.
Probably the same property, I just have. he
Okay,
just has
it
more
is.
properties.
Mr. Lott?
You've heard from both the taxpayer and the assessor, so I'm going to just reiterate that after inspecting the property, the rear access is not available, and so therefore I qualify that portion of the property as excess land. It has use to the taxpayer specifically, to whoever the occupant of the property is, but when you place the property on the, that lot can't be re-subdivided. Like currently, it has no use other than to the owner of the rear property behind. So I applied a blended value. I didn't use properties on Moss Street because they didn't fall within the quadrennial cycle. So I utilized comparables within the neighborhood, which are not waterfront properties, but that is what was available to me. The assessor had a value on of $20 a square foot, and the range was $8.79 a square foot to $27.30 a square foot. I determined, because the average lot in Orleans Parish is 110 feet deep, what my blended value basically does is take 65 by 110 square feet at $20 a square foot, and the rear portion of the property is worth approximately half of that at 10. That's where the $14 a square foot comes from. And determined a fair market value of $232,200 for the subject property.
Explain it to me again.
Okay, so I tried to use the 4-3-2-1 method, but it just wasn't working because this lot is irregular shaped. So what I did was I took the average lot in Orleans Parish is 110 feet deep. So this property is 65.
Average residential lot.
The average residential lot in Orleans Parish is 110 feet deep. So I took the 65 by 110 square feet and applied a $20 per square foot value to the subject property. And then the remaining portion of the lot, from 110 square feet to the 265, so 155 square feet by 65 square feet at $10 per square foot.
Which Alicia, that's actually greater than it just being labeled excess land.
Correct. That's much greater than it being labeled excess land.
Where did the $20 and the $10 come from?
The $20 per square foot came from the comparables that I used on my appraisal report. That was
Okay.
about the average range. You see those?
Okay,
She's talking to these right here, which actually were not on Mall Street.
We're not on Moss Street.
Distance-wise, how far were they property?
I used less than a 1 mile radius. I mean, everything is within it's definitely less than a 1 mile. I mean, I live in Orleans Parish, and I wouldn't use anything beyond that. It was not an easy feat to find land comparables within this area, but they were the most applicable.
And the $27 rate
Mm-hmm.
is the higher rate, which
Correct.
to me would lean more to the subject property being a premier property also on Moss Street, as Mr. Fairbanks stated.
I don't disagree with you, but I do find that whenever we're performing land appraisal specifically, I'd like to take note of the value that the assessor utilizes and determine whether or not that is well within reason. If the assessor's value is well within reason, then typically my land appraisal is going to agree with the assessor's land value if it's within reason. If it weren't, then my value could have quite possibly been at $27 per square foot. But again, there's a range. I mean, it's rare that I'm going to have an appraisal, I'm going to perform an appraisal report, and my final value is going to be at the highest end of the range. you know.
Well, if you would weight it more toward the subject property, it certainly could be toward the high end. It should be toward the high end.
It could. In this case, it wasn't. So therefore, I utilized that $20 per square foot value, which I found to be appropriate. As I said, for the front of the lot, and $10 a square foot for the rear of the lot.
And you divided that in half.
And then combine those values. And that's where that $14 per square foot is a blended value, but that's how that was calculated.
Well, if it was calculated like that, I think I 50%.
Well, okay. So what I stated was that I used the 65 by 110 because 110 is the average depth of the residential lot in Orleans Parish, which means that that's a smaller portion. The rear of the lot that I'm labeling excess land is, and that's where the 14 comes in. It's not a complete divide. It's the actual calculation.
When I'm looking at the sale adjustment grid, and it simply says 16,585 square feet times $14 a square foot. I don't see on here where is the $20 and the $10 and the analysis of that? I mean, to me, it looks like it's just a range of $879 to $2730, and you use
I didn't put that
$14 a
narrative.
foot.
Right. I didn't enter that narrative in the appraisal report because I considered it to be a blended value and intended on testifying to you all as to how that value was calculated.
So basically, you're arriving at the assessor's per square foot valuation, 20, on a atypical size lot in that area.
Correct.
The back part, we're discounting or reducing it to half in value on the rest of the remaining depth.
Correct. Correct.
And where does the $20 come from?
The $20 comes from the average value based on these three comparables: $12.45 a square foot, $27.30 a square foot, and $8.79.
That I got was a $16 average on
That would be weighting the view.
Equally.
That would be taking into account the
But you
location
used-
of the
you
subject
used
property.
$20.
I used 20
So you use $20 a square foot times how many square feet?
times 7,150 square feet,
which is 65 times 110.
and then which is 65 times 110. And that value actually ends up being a little bit greater. It ends up being $237,000, but that's $14.30 a square foot. And I mean, the assessor's not valuing anything on a cents
then you-
basis, so I
then-
round it down.
Then you use $10 a square foot
Times 9,435 square feet.
Did you?
And that's what does, and what's what, 65 by?
By 155.
The 155-foot depth takes into consideration the depth of the mother-in-law apartment in the back. It appears to me there's only like 40 to 50 feet beyond that would be excess land if you considered it excess land. If it's being
Okay,
used
so-
for the benefit
so-
of the property.
Okay.
then
So I'm going to read the definition of surplus land, which is land not necessarily to support the highest and best use of the existing property, but because physical limitations, building placement, or neighborhood norms cannot be sold off separately. Such land may or may not contribute positively to the land value and may or may not accommodate future expansion of an existing or anticipated improvement. So, as such, the surplus land, even with the mother-in-law unit, is only valuable to the owner of that subject property. Its limitations are to the owner of the subject property. And so I would still consider that excess land, not excess, surplus land.
And if you'd like a further clarification, I mean, there's one driveway on the property. The big house, if I were to sell them separately, they would be worth even less than if I sold them together, which is counterintuitive. Usually, when you subdivide, the price goes up. Here, when you subdivide, the price goes down. Why? Because you're impacted with an even worse ratio of frontage.
Yeah.
You know, then you only have 30 feet of frontage. The main house is like 24 feet wide. There's no way you could barely even walk to the back of the lot except through the house on the main lot, and then the other one is a driveway for the first 200 feet to get past the main house. And then you get to a little bit of, 1,100 square foot cottage with 1/4-inch sheetrock in the back that the wind hasn't blown over yet. And behind that is where we keep the chickens.
Can you read your definition as physical again for me?
Sure. But because of physical limitations, building placement, or neighborhood norms cannot be sold off separately. Such land may or may not contribute positively to value and may or may not accommodate future expansion of existing or anticipated improvement.
I believe that may or may not, I think this does contribute to the value of the lot, especially with the structure in the back that is being used for the benefit of the land.
See,
I somewhat agree with that, and I think that's why she gave $10 a square foot versus $5. I mean, I'm not trying to put words in her mouth, but that's what I hear her saying.
Yeah, I'm not saying there is no value to the property. It is valuable, but it is only valuable if the lots are combined. It is not as valuable if the lots are subdivided because the access is not there.
I agree,
So-
but if you use that scenario, then every parcel in Lakeview would fall under that jurisdiction.
But we're not
They're
in
all-
Lakeview.
But they're all 20 foot wide.
Yeah,
But they're not 276 feet deep.
Right.
Can I ask a question about the math? Just
Sure.
want to get that square.
So,
65 times the 110
yes,
is 143,000.
yes,
155 or 155 times 65
isn't,
is 100,750.
yes.
So I'm getting 243,750 if we use your methodology.
What I got is okay, hold on.
Just check it for me. I don't think that means wrong.
He's got it.
Well, but just using that theory, would it not be
So
an excess land that is not being used? I mean, if the property is being used with a structure on it as a living residence, would that not be considered land that is being used for the benefit of the property? And the excess land would be the 30, 40 feet that is behind that?
And when was this?
See, the problem is if I put the cottage at the front, there would be no driveway.
Well, the cottage was not at the front. The cottage was always in the back.
Well, we could drag it up to the front pretty easily,
You
but
suggested a 2015-10 calculation?
I'm sorry.
Are you suggesting a $20, $15, $10 calculation?
I'm suggesting $20.
Yeah, I understand.
I get 237,350, which ended up being $14.30 a square foot, and I rounded down.
It's 65 times 110 times 20, right? That's 143,000?
Yeah,
So maybe I'm wrong on it. What's the next
and then
calculation?
155
Uh-huh,
times 65.
uh-huh.
Oh, you're correct. My math is incorrect.
What, I'm sorry, Alicia, what depths are you using again for the first calculation?
110 feet
237.
times,
No, and then the next depth?
hold on, I'm calculating, times 65
Yeah.
equals 7,150 square feet.
There we go. That's more.
Oh, that's what happened.
and with all due respect to the commission appraiser and the assessor staff, the simplest one is 2,500 per linear foot. That's hard to miscalculate, and it's one of the older, truer methods for appraisal of property with high
You're
value
correct.
frontage.
Um,
Okay, what you have tabulated is accurate. I guess I rounded down as opposed to rounding up. Way down. Mm-hmm.
The property is 275 feet deep. If you take off 110 feet,
265.
it leaves
276.
It leaves,
Well, it's an irregular shaped lot.
I see.
So if
one
you-
side is
So-
longer
so
than-
Right, so one side is longer than the other,
So
so,
for the $10, you back into the remaining.
correct.
Gotcha. All right.
okay, but how does the math work out? I mean, it's 275, then the $10 a square foot would be $10 times 65 times 165, is that correct?
Correct.
Which is what number?
100,750.
Is that 250?
240. Let me-
I'm just trying to understand where these numbers are all
Give me
coming from.
just 1 minute.
237, 350?
16,
Yeah.
143.
minus.
Yeah,
This is
143.
where the disconnect is coming in. Okay, so it's an irregular shaped lot. So what I did was took the 155. I'm sorry, 110 square feet times 65, which is 7,150 square feet,
Right.
and I get 143,000 times
That's
20. Okay, and then the remaining square footage of the lot, because it's an irregular lot, I did
Okay.
16,585 minus 7,150
All right.
square feet, which
Okay.
equals 9,435
Times 10.
times 10.
So
And so the total then, so that's 94,350. That total is 237,350. And because that was an uneven dollar per square foot, I rounded down to a blended value of $14 per square foot. That's the calculation.
In order to round it down to the 232.2.
Correct.
So where'd you wind up?
What was my final value was 232,200.
One more thing, finally. If we use front footage valuation and we use lots at 55 feet to 65 feet based on the taxpayer appraisal, you have 4 lots in there that come out to an average of about $5,000 a front foot for that width, would give it a value of $324,000 on a front foot basis. The lower values are on 30 and 33 foot width lots.
And I've got 2 of those.
Used as one.
If I didn't, I wouldn't have a driveway.
You have to use them both as that. I think one of your buildings is built over the property line too, according
Right.
to things, so you have to sell it together.
Well, lots are so small, it's hard to keep all your building on. It's definitely hard to get to the back after you put a building on.
Does anybody have anything else to add, or?
I would just like to add that having the RTA pending, I guess it's obvious that, you know, if the land value is unchecked, it makes the RTA somewhat irrelevant, which is, again, why I'm here.
I was always under the impression it froze the whole assessment.
I had heard that was the traditional practice, but I guess that's not the
Well,
way the
I'd
law is
look
written.
into that if I were you. I'm not telling you I'm right.
Yeah. And I think that traditionally it does do that, but I think that based on the way the law is written, the way it was
Well,
advised to me.
the rules and regs that I looked through because of this hearing talk in terms of property.
It did. I saw the word property.
Okay, it says
not
property.
the
To
word
me,
improvements.
property is land and building. Now, I'm not telling you.
I'm with you, but
I'm not telling you there's not something somewhere that's got a further explanation.
I
'cause
didn't see
think-
anything in the law itself
Yeah,
that
so-
requires it to be only improvements.
Normally, when you say property, when you tell me my property, I think you're talking about the land and any improvements
Is
that
that a
you
matter
have sitting
that-
on the land.
Is that a matter within the jurisdiction of this commission?
No, that's, it's.
What
not.
about a procedural refusal to allow the improvement reassessment during a non-quadrennial?
Well,
assessment?
here's the problem. Problem is that the assessor's office in New Orleans, we've addressed this. The problem is the assessor's office in New Orleans was not valuing, and it's not Mr. Levine's fault, or Mr. Sandos in the back, it's not their fault. Was not valuing the whole city like, or the whole parish, the way I did in Jefferson and the way the other 63 parishes did it around the state. They were doing it in sections. This commission is a new commission. We discovered that in the course of having these hearings of what was going on. And as a result of that, we ordered the assessor's office to complete their reassessment by 2018, meaning this year, because that was the only remedy that was available. They did not revalue property in 2016 to the they only valued a portion
Yeah, they
of the city.
reassessed me, and then they did it again in 2018. They doubled the land value in 2016, and then they used their reassessment in 2018 to double the improvement value.
Yeah.
I think part of that was that we didn't realize it was a second building on the property until we got the
Yeah, but you're
seal.
not allowed to do a reassessment on a parcel by parcel basis. It has to be to fix a district-wide problem unless it's quadrennial.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
I
I'm
believe that
prepared to
there
make
is
a motion.
something
No, we will. Okay.
particularly wrong with the.
I'd like to make a motion.
Let's go ahead and get this matter resolved.
On docket number 17-22172-001, and value the land at $237,000.
I'll second.
Commissioner Varcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Wagsback,
Yes.
Commissioner Wood,
Yes.
Commissioner West. Commissioner West,
Yes.
Chairman Shaharney, I'm sorry.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the appeal of Easy Park LLC versus the Orleans Parish Board of Review, docket number 17-22171-001. I'd ask all the parties to testify to please come forward. All righty. All right, once again, this is a taxpayer appeal. Mr. McNamara, I believe you're here on behalf of Easy Park, is that?
I am,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, I'll ask you to please go ahead with your testimony.
Okay. This is, thank you. I was thinking this is my 24th year of appearing before the Tax Commission, so hopefully you don't see me again.
We don't control that.
Exactly. But in any event, I want to thank you all for the opportunity. This will be very brief. This is really a twofold argument. The first fold is the I don't want to call it sales chasing, but you know the
You can call it that.
sales chasing, and it's a selective reassessment of the property out of cycle. This property has sold twice. First time it sold most recently within this cycle in January 2015 for $15,400,000. from BRE, which is Blackstone, New Orleans. They bought a number of hotels and this parking garage at the time. Then they resold it to my client in July of 2017 for $27,551,000, which is what the assessor is really tracking is that sale. We suggest that we believe, and what we're requesting the commission to do is look at only the sale in 2015, because that's really right on the time frame of the commission. We've gone through and looked at a number of properties. I randomly selected properties, and what I've submitted to the commission already is a random selection of properties that sold in the time frame of 2015 to see if there's been a major reassessment or has there been some movement on some of those sales. And the ones that I found were the handful of changes were as a result of things like tearing down something or adding to something, but it wasn't a wholesale commitment to revalue those properties. The land value in the CBD is very tightly regulated, and all land values are the same. As you can see, there's been a big jump in the land values, and there's been no reassessment of any property in the central business district of any kind that has seen a land value other than ours. So, at that point, we looked at just the value of the individual property. Because we didn't own it at the time, we found an operator who operated 4 similar parking garages, and I've submitted this information to you. And we looked at the contracts that they had, the revenues and expenses that they had, brought it down. So these are 4 garages, one with 777 spaces, comparable B is 800 spaces, comparable C is 500 spaces, and comparable D is 500 spaces. We're at 529 spaces. Going through the standard income and expense approach shows us a value of $15,385,673. So that's more in line, again, with the sale that occurred back in January of 2015. We've seen this assessment now go kind of on a little bit of a roller coaster. Starting in 2016, it was assessed at $11,712,000. In 2017, it was reduced to $10,866,800, and now it jumps to $24,795,500 again as a result of the July sale in 2017. We think that the commission should not accept that last sale, look either to the first sale, or more appropriately give us a relief and not ask for no change, and we get back to the 10 million, which is a little greedy on our part, but that's
hey,
reality.
Look, if you ask for 10, you're not going to get 8. I can assure you that.
So,
you did an income approach in your information that you gave us, at least if I'm reading it correctly, indicating a value of roughly 15.4 million. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And we submitted this to the appraisal to the appraiser. But the fact is that we didn't operate the garage, so the best I could do was find an operator who operated similar garages and get the information that they had as of that year. The appraiser, the staff appraiser, went the other route of looking at average daily rates and going through the calculation of trying to figure out that, which, candidly, most downtown garages are under contract versus under hourly rates. But not knowing what the
numbers were,
operator did,
the numbers were similar, though.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, very similar.
So we're really kind of on that point. So the only thing that I would add is that the sale, which I did provide a newspaper article relative to the sale to the staff, wasn't included. But if you need me to get that, I can certainly pull that up.
Well, we certainly should not be using the sale
Correct.
as the basis for the assessment.
That's correct.
A sale may support an appraisal, or an appraisal may support the sale.
Correct.
But we should not be using a sale as the basis of the assessed value.
Yeah.
Because that would be sales change.
Unless it's within the, in my
Well,
opinion, unless it's for the
Yeah, I mean, look,
reassessment
if I did
cycle and you.
if I
you
did
got
an
a bunch of
appraisal
sales.
and I valued your house at $1 million and you paid $994 to $985,
Right,
I could tell you as an assessor, I'm not about to argue over $1,500 of
Right.
assessment.
right,
So, you know, but it supports it now.
yeah.
You gotta look twice if the sale is 900,000, your appraisal comes up at 3 million.
That's right.
You know, you might be right at the 3 million,
Yeah, yeah.
but the 900 might be right. So then you'd have
That's
to
correct.
go and take a look at it. But
I agree with you.
one can support the other, but certainly the sale as the basis for the assessment shouldn't be.
Yeah, I agree. I happen to be a fan of Mr. Shahardy's work. I've seen it over the years, and the way his office operated
suck
was
up
a
now.
model
You
for
live in
many.
Harahan, right?
Yeah.
I live in Lakeview.
You live in Lakeview. Who lives in
Yeah.
Harahan?
It was the
You
model.
live in Harahan. You should be up here.
He lives in Harry.
That's the same thing Mr. Sandow said the last hearing.
Is it? I don't recall.
All
So
right.
for the time being, Mr. Chairman, that's my
Sure.
presentation at this point.
Yeah, we used to have folks come in the office, they owned a lot of property, we knew, but I only knew to talk to you about 2 of them, which made me real suspect about the other 10.
So you looked at the other 10, right?
Yeah, I think we need to look at the other 10 first.
Right.
All right. Mr. Sandos, again, I mean, based on the information we were provided, it appears that the most recent sales price was used as the basis for the assessment here. It's 90%, exactly 90%.
It is exactly 90% of the
90%
most
of the
recent
sales
sale
price.
price. That's correct.
Is that coincidence or?
It probably is, to be honest with you, in this case.
Okay.
For the record, though,
Probably maybe 87.4.
No,
Yeah.
It was 90.000.
I'll run that by Assessor Williams.
486 or something.
Just for the record, though, I know Mr. McNamara cited some exhibits that he had submitted to
Mhm.
the Tax Commission. I never got a copy of those exhibits, and I'm not objecting to it. I just wanted to get that on the record, that the Assessor's Office is not in receipt of the documentation. He is.
Would you like a few moments to look at it, or?
No, I mean, Mr. McNamara is obviously well-respected and been around a long time, so.
Mhm.
You know, I
Had
mean-
y'all talked about this assessment or tried to negotiate?
No, Jim and I had a conversation a day or so ago. I talked to Assessor Williams about it. He was, adamant that he wanted to,
Sure, that's fine.
have our day in court, so to speak.
Sure.
And I had reached out prior to Darren Meyer,
Sure.
who's the head of commercial.
That's correct.
And then just nothing happened.
My main argument here today is in the staff appraisal that was done by Mr. Wallace, we have parking rates of similar properties, okay? And he landed at $11 a day. I would submit to you, if I could park in the CBD, in the heart of the CBD for $11 a day, I think everybody in this room and maybe everybody in this building would do that in a heartbeat. My main argument is that we also have advertised rates for the subject property, okay, that range from $7 to $28. So what I did is I averaged the rates for the subject property, and that average is $16 a day. And then I used the exact math that Mr. Wallace used in his appraisal, i.e. other income at $71,580, a 15% vacancy and collection loss, 30% for expenses, and I arrived at an NOI of, an NOI of $1.9 million. I then capitalized that at the exact rate that Mr. Wallace used, 8.33%, and I have an indicated value of $22,600,000. So my question would be, is if we have actual income that the property is producing, why wouldn't we use that instead of comparables that clearly are, on an average daily rate, very low for the CBD? And I think Mr. McNamara would agree with that.
Were the advertised rates, what year were those advertised rates from?
It doesn't say.
Were they current year or?
It says
Okay.
current advertised rates.
So that's, okay.
And what, you can get a rate if you work there, you go early bird, 9 in the morning, before 9 o'clock.
Sounds like
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
doing
there's all kind of variations. It's just, I just wanted to raise the question that if we have actual data, then why aren't we using that for the subject property specifically? And if you do the income approach that I did, the value's $22.5 million, using a rate of $16, which is an average of that the subject property is producing. And I don't necessarily know if that's the correct way to do it. It just seemed logical to me that if we have actual data
Well, where are you getting that actual data?
from Mr. Wallace's appraisal on page 13.
Mr. Sandos, run through me again that, how you did that income
Okay,
statement.
so what I did was I averaged the advertised rates for the subject property, which range from $7 to $28. That's on page 13 of Mr. Wallace's appraisal. The average of those rates is $16 a square foot, $16 a day. And then I employed the exact same math that Mr. Wallace did to arrive at the indicated value using the actual rates that
So
the
the
subject property.
potential gross income that you came up with was how much?
$3,089,360. And I have copies of this if you all want to look at it.
How many of these parking spots are under contract?
I don't know, and I don't think Mr. Wallace knows, and I don't think Mr.
So
McNamara
obviously,
knows.
under contract, you're not paying 28 per day. It's probably more like 10 per day or 11 per day.
I don't know. I don't know. But the methodology that Mr. Wallace used was, it was $11 across the board times 529 spaces times 365 days, and that's how he got his potential gross income. All I'm suggesting is that
And
if we use the actual rates that are produced by the subject property, average, it's $16 a day instead of
Well,
11.
No, there's pitfalls in all of this
Right.
because,
No, I understand that.
because, is it more likely that somebody's going to be parked there for 2 hours than it is someone going to be parked there for 22 hours? So if
Well,
you simply average it, it's kind of giving equal weight to all the breakdown of time.
well, so the median is $15.
Well, I understand that's the rate,
And
but
just-
that's not necessarily.
and I'm not trying to be
it's
argumentative.
actually- No, that's why I said at the
Chairman.
beginning of my comment,
Right.
there are pitfalls
Sure.
in this whole thing.
Absolutely.
The only two things that would be helpful, one thing would be actual income and expense statements.
Which was not
Which would
provided,
be
I don't
helpful,
think.
which we don't have.
Right.
The other thing would be actual or some verifiable income from similar parking garages of what their income is, and then
Which-
apply that statistic
Right.
to this one.
In
That
a
would
lot of
be the other
cases,
one.
those operators are hesitant to divulge that information because they don't want it to fall into the hands of their competitors, just like a hotel.
So
I might suggest that in this scenario, given where the property is located, which I believe is it adjacent to the Place St. Charles building? Or is it across the street or? Catty Corner. So, and that's who owns the building now, the parking garage is Place St. Charles.
Mhm.
Jim and I talked about this. It's not, I'm not, telling tales out of school or anything like that. And they purchased it because they needed parking for that building, for their tenants. So I would submit to the commission that the majority of those spaces are probably occupied by workers in Place St. Charles or other workers in the CBD
Which is making
who are
contractual.
parking there for 7, 8 hours a day.
Yeah, but they're under long-term contract.
I,
don't
that,
think they're paying a
they may
fixed
be.
rate.
I don't know.
I mean, if I drove there every day, okay, give me my monthly fee and I'll walk in.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a discount for that, but we just don't know.
I think it's a
is the
pretty
problem.
good discount.
I have no idea. I mean, maybe Jim could speak to that. But I personally don't have knowledge of that. So
Yeah,
I guess what I'm
normally
saying
they'll
is,
do
I guess what I'm
they'll
saying
rent
is
you-
that,
Yeah,
I guess
they'll-
what I'm saying is that the rates that the property is currently charging supports a significantly higher value than $16 million.
Kind of like not enough information. I mean, I understand your $15 and where it's coming from. That's
Right.
as if that's not all non-contractual parking spots.
Correct. That's correct.
I go down there to have a meeting in Place St. Charles, me and depends on how long I stay, but I gotta believe a lot of that building, if not the majority, is on a contractual with the tenants.
Right.
Place St. Charles.
And I would tend to agree with you, but I was just following the methodology that Mr. Wallace used. And Mr. Wallace made the assumption that everything's $11, whether you're under contract or not.
Yeah, and with that assumption, do you think that other parking garages are underassessed?
I believe so.
So possibly the assessor's office would look at that entire group as a whole.
That's correct. For the 2020 tax year, that's correct.
Yeah, and, I may add one comment, Mr. Wagaspat, to your line of questioning. This was prior owned by, originally owned by Emporia and a number of other limited partnerships or limited LLCs, and they were the three Hampton Inns in Orleans and the one out in Jefferson. And so they really operated off of the basis of the hotel needing the spaces, because you'd have overnight guests who would drive in, and that would be the primary user. It's going to shift now that.
Well, I wouldn't go there because most hotels in Orleans charge me about $40 a month.
Yeah. but honestly, but we don't know. You know, I called somebody that I know at Blackstone, and he laughed at me. I said, "Can I get the Oasis?" He said, "Yeah, right." He said, "Fly up here, and I'll show you the room where the boxes are, the warehouse."
You know, the risk they run by not providing information
Yeah.
is the appropriate authority not giving them the relief.
Well, I agree with you,
You know,
and it's our policy to provide the information. And you know, the best thing we could do here was go through and find an operator that had a number of garages and have them rebuild the revenue stream for us and the expenses.
Used to aggravate me when I worked downtown right out of a shoot. And I parked at the Energy Center. It would take 1 hour work to pay for my lunch. It was Chick-fil-A and food court in the parking. If you just think about that, it's just kind of like a setback when you first started your day.
I went to Allegro's one time in the Energy Center and had a $25 club sandwich. It was great.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I had that very
cocktails.
I had that very
Sandwiches
conversation
were
with
on
my
sale
wife.
that day.
Yeah, that was a special that day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got the special. All right. Mr. Wallace?
Okay, I physically inspected the subject property. It is a parking garage, and there is some retail space on the one of the bottom floors. The land value was based on vacant land comparables that came in at $60 a square foot, or $1,749,900. I also did a cost approach on the property, and I came up with a total value of $16,200,000, which would be $14,450,100 for the improvements, and the land value at $1,749,900. My income approach was $15,680,000, and I correlated the final, the cost approach and the income approach together and came up with a final value of $16 million. I wasn't providing any current financials as well. I did use the similar properties. I listed those in the report on page 13 from Mr. McNamara. They came in, if you want to look at it from an average, they came in at $11.33 a square foot. That's again on page 13 in the middle of the page. And I also used the current advertised subject rates, and if you average those, as Mr. Sandos said, they do come in at $16. I did just do I looked back through Google Maps, and I picked up on their sign changes pretty often. If you look at the sign out front, their average rates, they'll have it sitting out front, and for 2017 it was $13.50 was the average daily rate. For 2018 they had 1 hour for $6, 2 hours for $8, 12 for $15, and so on. And their current advertised rates right now, as of the date of the inspection, were different than those rates. So I don't know if they have a stack of signs and they just bring them in and out, but that's pretty much it.
When you say average daily rate, are you talking about what if I were to park my car there, I'd be paying $10 for the day, or,
Well, they have it by the current advertised subject rate for 0 to 1 hour, $7. I believe that may be part of the early bird special if you get in. 1 to 2 hours is $10.
Right.
2 to 3 is 12, and it goes up. Without the financials, I just felt like a combination of the 1133 for the similar properties that he provided, and the range of 7. The advertised subjects are 7 to 28. I believe the 28 is probably on contracts. I would think so. I'm not positive, but I think so. And I just correlated it at $11.
so are you saying that the average, you're saying that the average pay for parking there is $11?
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Okay, so some people are
Yeah.
parking for an hour,
Some
some
might
people are
park for an
parking
hour,
for 10
right.
hours.
Right,
but
and
the
they may
average-
drive off and somebody may drive in and pay for 3 or 4 hours, so it may be a little bit higher. It just, I mean, it's it's nonstop, you know?
Yeah.
But on Sundays in the fall,
Well, Sundays,
you might pay $50 for 3 hours.
Depends on what festivals going
That's
on
right.
in the quarter.
Well, I'm specifically talking about Saints games.
Yeah.
Depends on the
You'd be-
record.
Yeah, and you'd be lucky to get in for less than 30, to be
And on
honest.
Sundays in June, you may not fill the garage, it's so hot.
Yeah.
But I notice your cost approach is pretty close to the income approach.
Right, I use the cost approach as well, just for support. That was based on, that included the retail space. There's it's called Spa Atlantis, I believe. It's a ladies' spa, and I included that in there as well.
I think in the future, good information would obviously be the number of contract parking spots and what that average monthly rate would be, or convert it to daily rate.
I'm sorry?
If you're able to get it, I think in the future,
Right.
if we
Yeah.
can get the number of contract parking
Right.
spots
Right.
and be able to convert that,
Yeah, I
to
mean,
see
I
what that
inquired-
rate is
I
compared to the
inquired with-
daily. you know?
Right. I asked for it, but they didn't have
You
it.
know, I would recommend that we get much more aggressive about this. And,
I was pretty aggressive from the
Well-
chain of emails that we had. I didn't get it.
you know, it's almost almost as if somebody's trying to hide something.
Correct, and it puts everybody in a bad spot.
Yeah, it really does, you know.
Mr. Chairman, I do have to respond to that. We weren't hiding it. We
Well,
just didn't
Mr.
have the
McNamara,
information.
I know you.
Yeah, yeah, we just didn't
I got
have the
no problem with you.
information. Yeah.
You know, I got no problem with you. I think you do a great job.
Thank you.
But you're limited by what your client will give you.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we didn't own it, you know, I mean, I couldn't get it, so.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Can I close?
Sure.
So having heard that, I respectfully request that you take no change off of last year, which set the value at $10,866,800, both land and improvements.
Any alternative to that?
And then I think, my client is prepared to accept the appraisal of the commission. It's slightly higher than we think, but, in all fairness, given the information, we thought it was a reasonable number.
Yep. Want to go, Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay.
On the appeal of Easy Park LLC versus Orleans Parish Board of Review. My motion is to set the land value of $1,749,900, improvements at $14,250,100 for $16 million even total.
I'd second that.
Commissioner Varcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Wagensback,
Yes.
Commissioner Wood,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Yes.
Chairman Shahardy.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was trying to keep a straight face while
saying that number while he's looking at me over his glasses.
Oh, these are reading glasses. You're fuzzy right now, and that's how I can see you.
I was trying not to smile.
All righty. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
The Tax Commission hereby accepts all pre-filed documents and oral testimony into the record as Taxpayer Exhibit 1 in Globo, Assessor Exhibit 1 in Globo, and Louisiana Tax Commission Staff Appraiser Exhibit 1 in Globo for each appeal hearing conducted today respectfully. All right, the next matter on the agenda is change orders. The other appeals on today's docket have either been withdrawn or settled or continued. So we're on to the change orders.
Chelsea Soche with the Louisiana Tax Commission. We have a total of 445 change orders for today's meeting. Staff has reviewed and recommends that the Commission place 32 under pending status and approve 413.
I would move that we accept staff recommendations to approve 413 change orders and place 32 on pending status.
Second.
Commissioner Vercher?
Yes.
Commissioner Wagensback?
Yes.
Commissioner Wood?
Yes.
Commissioner West?
Yes.
Chairman Shahardy?
Yes. And now consider tax sale cancellations.
We have one tax sale cancellation for today's meeting for Vernon Parish, Assessor's Office error. Staff has reviewed and recommends that the Commission approve this cancellation.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we accept staff recommendations and approve the tax sale cancellation as submitted for Vernon Parish.
I'd second that.
Commissioner Vercher?
Yes.
Commissioner Wagensback?
Yes.
Commissioner Wood?
Yes.
Commissioner West?
Yes.
Chairman Shahardy?
Yes. And that's all the change orders, is that correct? That includes that special one in New Orleans?
Yes.
It's included in the change
Yeah,
orders?
added it to the number.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right, there being no other matters to come before the Commission at this time, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Vercher?
Yes.
Commissioner Wagensback?
Yes.
Commissioner Wood?
Yes.
Commissioner West?
Yes.
Chairman Shahardy?
Yes.